Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Em, and today we are going to do a reading update for middle grade March. So if you are participating in middle grade or you are interested in middle grade, stick around and we're going to talk about some very wide array of books that I've read so far this month. So I think we're just going to go in chronological order for what I finished. That seems to be the easiest way to organize this. I don't remember what my ratings are for these books, but I can give you a basic plot and the vibes, which is really all I am good for, is the vibes. So the first book I finished this month for middle grade March was Bright Storm by Vashti Hardy. This is about twins, Arthur and Maudie, whose father is an explorer and he is on an expedition, and they find out that his ship has gone missing and he is believed to have perished on the expedition. I wrote in my book journal that this reminded me a lot of A Little Princess if Sarah Crew had been a twin and had gone to find her father when he was presumed dead, and if it was steampunk. So it's basically not A Little Princess at all, but that's what it reminded me of. I thought this was a really fun adventure. I loved the found family aspect. I loved the steampunk aspect. I think the talk about how they power their ships was really interesting. I thought the expedition was really exciting. And there was like a really cool reveal about 3/4 of the way through the book that I hadn't seen coming, or I didn't see coming. And I think this is really fun. It's a first in a series. I don't know that I would continue to read the series because I also think that this is a middle grade that is very much for the intended audience and maybe not for adults who also like to read middle grade. But if you've read this before, if you've read this already and you disagree with me, like, feel free to correct me. That was just the impression I got. So I am excited to keep this on the shelf in the hopes that one of my children will pick it up to see what they think. Thought it was a good time. It was really fun. Moving on. Next book I finished is a new release. This is Legends of Lotus Island is the series, and then the book is called The Guardian Test. And this is by Christina Soon-Tornvat, who is one of my very favorite middle grade authors. She has a book called A Wish in the Dark, which is my favorite middle grade. This is a little side tangent. This is Les Miserables retelling set in a Thailand-inspired fantasy world, and it's just so good. But anyways, she had this series come out at the beginning of March, I think, and it's I think for younger middle grade, like this would be more for like I think an 8-year-old. Somebody who is really just starting to get into chapter books, but maybe still is a little intimidated by wall-to-wall words, because the chapters are really short, and there's like little illustrations on the pages to help break up all the words. But this one is fantasy, and in this world, our main character, Plum, she lives with her grandparents, and in their world they have these people called guardians, and they protect animals and the environment. And if you want to be a guardian, you need to go to the Guardian Island and train, basically. So you go, and it's kind of like boarding school, and you train for a month, and then at the end of the month there is a test to see if you have the magic needed to be a guardian, and if you pass the test, then you stay and you train for a year, and then at the end of that year you become a full-fledged guardian. So this is just the first month, so like the span of time is that first month. And I believe book 2 is just going to be like part of that first year of training. I have an arc for book 2, but I just haven't read it yet. But I really liked Plum. Like, she's really kind. She's a little insecure. She's been living on a farm with her grandparents, and a lot of the other kids are from bigger islands and bigger cities and have more money than she does, or her family does. And so she's dealing with a lot of insecurity, but also really wants to do her best. And I think she's really sweet, and it's really easy to root for her and for the friends that she makes at the Guardian Island. So I thought this was really lovely, and I'm gonna see if I can convince my 7-year-old to have it be a bedtime book. And then the third book I finished is A Rover Story by Jasmine Warga. This book. I very impulsively bought this book for one of my daughters in January for her birthday, and then I read it. But this is the sweetest story. This is a novel about a fictional Mars rover named Resilience, and it's part of it is from Resilience's perspective as he is being built and tested and prepped to go to Mars, and then even while he is on Mars. And the other perspective is from a girl named Sophie, whose mom is one of the lead engineers building Resilience. And her letters that she writes to him are almost like diary entries. And it spans quite a long bit of time. Sophie is, I think, 11 or 12 when she starts writing her letters. And by the end of the book, she's an adult. But it was just so sweet, so lovely. A lot about just like what it means to be human and to be yourself when, you know, other people are telling you who you should be instead. And I did tear up unexpectedly towards the end because it just like curled itself around my heart. It was so sweet. I am also a big sucker for an AI book, so there is that. Like, I am, I guess, predetermined to like a robot story. But I think if you or a middle grade reader in your life like Wild Robot, I think this is a really good read-alike in terms of sweetness and lovability. I don't know. I just really liked it, and I want more people to read it because I feel like it has not gotten hardly any attention, and it is just the sweetest book. I loved it so much. So please, please, please put A Rover Story on your TBR. It's so good. In a totally, totally different tone, the book I finished after that was The Dark Lord Clementine by Sarah Jean Horowitz. This book was a ride. This book is fantasy. And in this fantasy, there are people called Dark Lords who basically rule over villages and terrorize everybody. And in this one, Dark Lord Elithor has a, how old is she? 12-year-old daughter named Clementine, obviously. Wouldn't that have been embarrassing if I had forgotten her name when it's right there on the cover? But at the beginning of the book, Clementine's father, he's not doing so great. He is very slowly being whittled away. So he is getting smaller in shorter and shorter increments to the point where, like, as his fingers shrink, like one day his pinky finger gets so small that it just pops off his hand and falls in the soup tureen, and then they eat the soup anyways. That's the kind of humor we're dealing with. So if that made you go yikes instead of laugh, then this is not the book for you. But if you chuckled a little bit, you're good. And so obviously there's something wrong, and he determines that the Widow Witch has cursed him, and he locks himself away in his study to figure out how to break the curse, and basically leaves Clementine to handle everything. Like their servants all leave, so she's responsible for cooking, she's responsible for taking care of the animals on their property, she's responsible for like everything. He just totally abandons her and leaves her to handle everything. And when she comes to ask for help, he's like, don't bother me, and slams the door in her face. And Clementine's grown up really isolated, and you know, the villagers like live in fear of her father, and so the village kids don't trust her. But this is really just like Clementine learning how to make friends, and that maybe she doesn't want to be a Dark Lord after all. It's not a spoiler. It's like, it's on the back of the book. It's the tag. But again, I found the aspects of making friendship in this book to be really sweet and really relatable. And I really love a main character who is so buttoned up and has closed themselves off, learning how to open themselves up again, or for the first time in some cases. I really love that. I think there's a lot of beauty in that kind of story. And this was definitely that was definitely an aspect of this. Clementine really learns how to peel herself open and let people in. And it was great. It was great. It was a good time. And then the last middle grade that I finished so far this month, I just finished this maybe like 15 minutes ago, however long I've been filming this video. That how long ago is when I finished this book. Anyways, this is The Door of No Return by Kwame Alexander. This is a novel in verse. And okay, here's my question. I don't know if anybody has the answer for this one, but this is my question. I know adults really love Kwame Alexander, but do kids like his books? Because when I worked at the bookstore, it was always really hard to sell parents on a novel in verse. Now, how I think about them is I think these are really great. Like, I mean, they're great for anybody, but I think novel in verse is also really perfect for kids who are still predominantly reading graphic novels. Not that there's anything wrong with graphic novels. I love a graphic novel. But I do know that there are kids who stay with graphic novels because wall-to-wall words in a traditional picture book or a traditional chapter book are really intimidating. And I think a novel in verse is a really great stepping stone from graphic novels to traditional novels. So I love them for that. And I wish I'd had that realization when I was still bookselling, but I was able to pass it on to my friend that still works at the bookstore. So somebody will get use out of it, because this just looks, I think if you're a kid who's intimidated by chapter books, I think this just looks so much more doable than a more traditional book. But anyways, oops. This, I thought this was historical fiction. And then like right at the end, there was like a fantastical element that was introduced. But this is supposed to be the first in a trilogy. And it's about a boy named Kofi who lives in a village in Africa, and he just like wants to hang out with his friends, be around the girl he likes, and he has all these expectations being thrust on him from his teacher, from his parents, from his older brother. He has an older cousin who bullies him, and so he's always trying to like prove himself to his cousin. And he is just like living his life. And I think that's super relatable. I will say, this got real violent around this mark. It took a turn I wasn't quite prepared for. So I would recommend this definitely for older middle grade readers, and middle grade readers who aren't sensitive readers. Because like I said, this did take a turn that I wasn't prepared for, because there's no mention of it in the synopsis, or in the, like, I have the arc, and there's usually like a letter from the publisher, and there's no mention of it in the publisher. So just be aware of that if you decide to pick this up. But I did really like it. I just wonder how kids think of Kwame Alexander's books. I would love to know. I'm always so curious about how, because I know how adults feel about a lot of middle grade books, but like, unless my kids have read it, I don't really know what kids think of these books. So I don't know. I'd be interested. All right, so based off of what I have read already this month, if I was to rate these, like to stack them up, I think I'd put Door of No Return last. This has probably been my least favorite so far. Like, even though I think it's really good, it was just my least favorite. And then next I would probably do Bright Storm, and then The Guardian Test, and then Dark Lord Clementine, and then Rover Story as my absolute favorite. And this is like, I think I gave this a 3.5 stars, and I gave this a 5 or 4.5 stars. So all pretty high ratings. But yeah. All right, that is my middle grade March update, since we're about halfway through the month. If you're participating, I would love to hear what you've read, maybe what your favorite has been so far. If you've read a Rover Story yet, because I think this is the like official group read for middle grade March. So if you've read this already and want to talk about it, love to hear your thoughts. And I hope you all are having a great whatever. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.